Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ASUG Partner Webcast. My name is Maureen McInerney, Partner Marketing Specialist here at ASUG, and I'll be your moderator for this event. I'd like to thank everyone for taking the time today to join us for this presentation. Today's webcast is being recorded. The link to the recording and the accompanied slides will be posted to the ASUG website calendar of events, and all registrants from today will receive a follow-up email with the link to those materials once the webcast has concluded. For the best viewing experience, we recommend using a wired internet connection and closing any programs or browser sessions running in the background. The webcast is streamed through your computer, so there is no dial-in number. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help Engagement tool at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to remind our audience members that you can submit your questions at any time by using the Q&A widget on your console or by clicking on the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Questions will be answered during our Q&A at the end of the presentation. Today's webcast is Implementing Digital Supply Chain Solutions, Lessons Learned. Our speaker today is John DiPaolo, Chief Strategy Officer from ASUG. And with that, I'll hand it over to John to get us started today.
Thank you, Maureen. I appreciate the introduction. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. And what we're going to review today in our webcast are lessons learned across the implementation of digital supply chain solutions. Towards the end of the presentation, we're actually going to dive into 3 separate case studies of implementations that we have worked on with our customers, and some of the lessons learned and approaches that they took in making the transformation into the digital supply chain and making it in a way that was transformative for their organizations, yet they were still able to do it in a way to gain value quickly along the way. With that, I just want to give a brief introduction of the Axis organization. Axis has been around for over 25 years, delivering supply chain solutions to the Fortune 1000. We build personalized supply chain solutions on a standard cloud-based platform, and our focus is in 3 major areas. So we do a significant amount of work in the chemical space, in life sciences, and in CPG as it relates to product moving throughout the supply chain. Our primary backend that we tie into is SAP and all versions of SAP that are out there. So we do a lot of work in the ECC space. We also have done a significant amount of work in helping our customers migrate their implementations from ECC to S4. And we will talk about some of those as we go through today's presentation as well. You can see in the block there some of the customers that we do business with. But with having said that, I also want to thank our co-sponsor, Honeywell. And Honeywell is a provider of many of the devices that we utilize in our IoT implementations. So great thanks to Honeywell for their assistance in today's webcast as well. And with that, let's go on with the presentation. So like all stories, they have to start at the beginning. And, when we first started doing work, 25 years ago, in the good old days of manufacturing and distribution, the supply chains tended to be very linear. They tended to be sequential in nature, and they were very much supply driven. So, many companies were vertically integrated across their supply chains. And now, in today's world, the traditional supply chains really no longer suffice. Excuse me for just a moment here. So in the traditional supply chain, the data tend to be very siloed in nature. They tended to be very static. And they also were tough to adjust. So as you went through and took a look at your business processes, the supply chains also tended to be inflexible. In the new world of the digital supply chain, What we really need is the ability to have solutions that are dynamic, that are scalable, that allow you to collaborate with your customers, and that are perceptive. And what I mean by perceptive is being able to look at what is going on across your solutions and across your supply chain and be able to make decisions based upon the activities of not only what's going on within your supply chain, but what's going on with your partner's supply chain as well. So there are many different drivers that we see in the industry today that are really important in transforming to the digital supply chain. So when we look at these industry drivers, one of the areas kind of on the left-hand side of the slide here are really that the customer expectations are changing, and those customer expectations are changing rapidly. People call it the Amazon effect. The reality is that customers' expectations of how they buy their product, how that product is delivered, how quickly it is delivered from the time that the product is ordered, the frequency that customers order, as well as the ability to have different delivery methods has become very common within the supply chain. The other thing that we're seeing across our network is a much greater dependence of partners and third parties. So over the past 20 years, the proliferation of subcontractors, third-party manufacturers, third-party distributors has grown greatly across our customer base. And the ability to be able to integrate those partners and third parties quickly and easily is key to the transformation to the digital supply chain. And we'll actually spend a good deal of time later in the presentation on a case study around that very thing. We're also seeing a much greater risk in supply chain and a much greater amount of regulation and compliance needs across different industries and across different geographies. And then mergers and acquisitions have become very common. And what we're seeing is the ability to incorporate new companies and then spin those companies back off as a part of normal business is something that we're seeing every day. There's also a significant number of supply chain drivers that we're starting to see that are changing the way that solutions can be delivered. Obviously, movement to the cloud has been a very big part of the journey to the digital supply chain. So that ability to leverage the cloud to quickly onboard new partners, to quickly bring new solutions online is key to transformation to the digital supply chain. The other area that we're starting to see across the board is really the use and the leveraging of people's ability to have ubiquitous mobile access across the entire supply chain. So that ability to have mobile capability in the hands of your inspectors, in the hands of your customers, in the hands of remote workers, and be able to have meaningful business activity has changed the way that we do business. Then we can talk about what is going on in the technology world. So the proliferation of devices and what we call industrial IoT or IoT, new technologies coming online in the area of blockchain and things of that nature, the ability to store vast amounts of data, so big data, data lakes, and then the integration of machine learning and the use of machine learning across the supply chain is now starting to become very prevalent. And we'll go into some examples of that as well. And because of all these different industry drivers and IT drivers, it is very important to have that frictionless interoperability of systems. So when we talk about our vision for the digital supply chain, it really breaks down into two different areas. The first one is that modern supply chains demand transparency. And what do I mean by that? So in the modern supply chain, there are a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of partners involved. There's a need for being able to see very granular information so that you can make decisions and you can adjust the flow of goods and services throughout your supply chain. But in order to do that, we really feel that leveraging your existing infrastructure, your existing systems, the investment that you've made in SAP and other solutions is key. We're not looking to replace those systems. We're really looking to add value to those systems at the edge. And what I mean by adding value at the edge is being able to have execution level systems across your network, being able to feed your existing systems in real time with meaningful information and tie that back in so that you get a better view as to what's going on across your supply chain. Now, that's a big vision, and there are some steps that we'll talk to on how, in fact, do you get there. So I want to spend some time on the steps that we've talked with our customers about and that other people have referenced in building a path to the digital supply chain. And the base foundational step that we believe is extremely important in order to build a foundation for your supply chain is being able to capture data at the source. And that data should be high fidelity, it should be granular, and it should allow you to incorporate product movements and other activities at the point in time where they happen. As I like to put, the act of moving the product from one location to another or transforming the product from one item to another should feed the system. That shouldn't happen after the fact. Nobody should have to go back in and enter information. So that ability to capture data at the source is key to starting your path to the digital supply chain. And that includes across your partner network. It includes pulling information from manufacturing equipment. It includes shop floor equipment, all of those different areas. The next important part of building that path is really looking at what context that you want to apply to that information. And when you start to sit back and think about what does context data mean, it really means the ability to add additional information to a piece of data that you're capturing at the source and have that be flexible. So you'll see in one of our case studies that it's important to be able to capture different pieces of context data for different pieces of information and apply them appropriately. So having that flexibility to apply the right context data will be key in your transition to the digital supply chain. The next two areas that we're going to talk about is really leveraging your existing systems of record and being able to integrate that data that you're capturing at the source back into your ERP systems, your SAP systems in a meaningful way. So that doesn't always mean that you need to send all of the information. So being able to send the correct level of information into your SAP system and into your other systems of record, and then keep the other context data and maybe the more granular information in a secondary system of value is what really will provide you with that system of engagement. And that will drive you to the fourth area, which is the ability to give you insight and visibility. So this is where you really start driving those digital processes throughout your network. So we refer to that as integrated process management. So being able to quickly understand what's going on across your network with the right level of data and the right level of information, and then ultimately being able to provide what we call a virtual enterprise that's agile. So the key to all of this is you're really driving towards agility. So that means being able to respond to new business models as they come out, dynamically adjusting your system to change. And a lot of that happens with a combination of being able to rapidly adjust what's going on at the edge and integrate that into your existing business processes that you've built into your ERP system. So as you think about building that path to the digital supply chain, make sure that you're thinking about everything from what data I have, where I'm capturing it, how I'm capturing it, applying the appropriate context to that information, leveraging all of your systems that you have within your enterprise. So again, not necessarily replacing them, but leveraging and getting value out of them. And then ultimately being able to quickly and dynamically adjust to things that are going on with your business model. So what that gives you is really the unprecedented ability to allow you to capture, manage, and leverage uniquely identified context-aware data throughout your supply chain. I want to spend a little bit of time on this slide And not all architectures need to be the same, but the way that we look at the world and from our experience, there's a couple of components of this architecture which are very important to creating a system that will work in a mixed environment. So you'll see here that the cloud really is managing all of the processes and data management as items go throughout the supply chain. But we also feel that it's very important to have potentially a local solution running at the edge to manage such things as IoT transactions, to manage local survivability in the event of a wide area or local area network outage, and to be able to talk to your shop floor control systems, things like the new technologies that people are starting to leverage around RFID and low energy Bluetooth, and being able to talk to MES and other shop floor systems. So our recommendation and what we've learned in working with other customers is that doing a direct connection to from those type of devices to the cloud is challenging, and having that edge gateway capability that allows you to manage the speed that you need within your facilities or within your partner facilities, and having that edge solution talk to the cloud, and then having the cloud process information into your SAP system and your other support systems, gives you a very robust, scalable solution. The other thing that it gives you is the ability to run your real-time analytics and dashboard information by combining information from the cloud solution and your SAP system in one view of what's going on. So you get to leverage the business processing capability of your SAP system and your other support systems with the granular data that you've captured in the cloud to build real-time analytics and dashboard. Now, once you have this infrastructure in place, you can then start to look at how am I going to integrate across my partner network or across my customer network. So the cloud gives us that capability of providing real-time transactions or near real-time transactions from my partners via, if they're doing distribution for me, or third-party manufacturing, or even getting real-time information from my customers. And obviously, as we talked about earlier, now with the proliferation of mobile, the ability to have mobile access tied in through the cloud in a secure way, and being able to get information from all of those different sources is key to an integrated solution that will allow you to really start to take advantage of the digital supply chain. So I want to go through and talk about a couple of different case studies because it's all interesting around the theory of transforming to the digital supply chain. But the reality of having done it in a number of different industries and for a number of different companies, we've learned a bunch of different things. And the first case study that I want to talk about is a chemical company of ours that had around 200 third parties that they wanted to be able to integrate the status of these third parties, did both production, distribution, and value-added services for them. So before we started this project, the way they were doing it was very much via phone, fax, email, phone calls to try and get status of what was going on across their production network as well as across their distribution network. And what we decided to do was to work with them on a private cloud-based solution that would allow them to integrate all of their third parties into this network to get real-time production information, real-time distribution information back into their SAP system. And the way that they achieved that was by creating virtual plants within their SAP system and then leveraging the cloud solution in order to allow integration from those third parties. Now, the key to the integration, and we collectively addressed this problem very early, was not all of their partners were created equal. So they couldn't just say to their partner network, okay, you will do everything via EDI, or you will do everything via flat file transfer. So we came up with a multimodal environment that allowed the partners to choose the integration method that they were going to use. So when we talk about lessons learned, when we looked at this solution, we quickly learned that not all partner types were created equal, that multiple connection types were required in order to be able to support all of the network connections and all of the different partners that they had within their network. And by doing this, they eliminated the challenge that a lot of companies that we've seen have in going to a digital supply chain, is that they're able to support 80% of their customers by putting out a single standard, or 80% of their partners. But then the 20% of their partners they can't support become challenging, because quite honestly, those were the 20% they had problems with anyway. So by allowing multiple connection types with multiple technologies to their different partners, it allowed them to view all of their partners the same way and allow the partner to be much quicker in the onboarding process of being able to participate in the network. So that onboarding process, we were able to get down to under a day per partner in order to onboard a new partner into the solution. And that became very important for this implementation for two reasons. First, they had a wide variety of partners, as we talked about. And second, they also had some seasonal businesses. And in the seasonal business, what they were able to do was bring up and down that network very quickly in order to support demand for that particular point in time. So that capability of having multiple connection types was key. The other thing was, because they were integrating all of that data into their SAP system through this virtual plant process, they could quickly and easily see issues and correct them across their entire network. So very rapid ROI, a very rapid payback, and the ability to bring new networks on board was inherent within this solution. So other business units were able to leverage this solution as it was rolled out. The next case study that I want to talk about is a garment rental company that we did a project with. And they were implementing a very, very sophisticated SAP environment. So they were leveraging SAP ECC with the AFS solution along with it. They had SAP Event Management running on HANA, and they also were running the SAP CRM system. So a very big SAP customer, very successful with a very complex implementation. But then they had all of these serialized items in their garments across 225 facilities, around 200 million garments that were needed to be tracked. And we needed to be able to do all of this with very rapid integration into SAP and very rapid scanning times. So because of the business model that they had, we needed to be able to support 1/4 second response time or faster for each scan that went into the system. So when we talk about what the solution was, we have a couple of different things that become important. First, every garment was serialized so that its unique attributes can be associated. So you'll remember back in the presentation, we talked about context data and what that meant. The way that they have the system configured is for each type of garment, they can associate different attributes with that garment that are important just for that one. And the other thing is that they can keep them for the period of time that's important for that garment. The other part of the solution that was put in place was the ability to eliminate all paper for the receive, pick, pack, and ship processes. And then probably most importantly, in the way that this system was put together from a technical perspective, is the IoT gateway was installed at every facility that they have for store and forward capability. One of the challenges that we had was that we were not getting consistent network speed across their entire location network in order to support the scanning time that was needed for this solution. So by putting the IoT gateway in place, we were able to have each independent facility run at the speed that it needed to, and then the IoT gateway would decide when it was time to share information back through the private cloud to their central system. That capability gives very consistent response time to all of their facilities and to all of their partners. And the other area was that it allowed us to also connect to different technologies within each facility based upon the needs of that unique facility. So by having that edge processing capability, we can optimize the solution for each individual facility. So what were the lessons learned around that solution? Well, first, the biggest one is when we started the project, we were keeping all of the information for every garment for its entire lifetime. What we quickly learned after a period of time was that we really didn't need to do that. So we were able to adjust the way that we track and store information so that for certain types of garments or for certain classes, we would only keep a skeleton of information once it came out of service. But for more important or other garments that needed to keep their information for their entire life cycle, we were able to keep whatever level of information we needed for that. The garment attributes, again, were completely configurable based upon the state of the item. And then the other thing is, in the digital world, once you get used to that quarter-second response time, it's very hard to go back to paper. So the reality was that this solution, once adopted, became an integral part to running their supply chain. The third case study that I'm going to go through is really an interesting case study in the evolution of technology. 5 years ago, if you had told us that we were going to be able to track metal cylinders in an area utilizing passive RFID technology, I would have told you there's no way to do that. Well, in today's world, we can do that. The technology has grown up in such a way that we can, through a combination of RFID and barcode, be able to understand within 10 feet where a cylinder or canister is within a particular facility. So we have a customer who came to us. They were a specialty gas manufacturer, and they needed to be able to locate the exact canister or cylinder anywhere in their supply chain, and more importantly, quickly understand its status. So how does that fit into the digital supply chain? Well, one of the concepts that they needed to be able to include is a digital representation of all of the inspection and maintenance data that goes along with that cylinder. So in the traditional world, they would have a cylinder. They would need to understand when it was last maintained or when it was last inspected. That would be stored in a filing cabinet somewhere. They would go look that up, bring that out, and go on their way. In the new world, they can scan or they can read any canister anywhere within any of their facilities and understand what its status is, understand the last time it was maintained, understand what its inspection status is it eligible for the chemical that they're going to put in it, and all of this is done through a cloud-based solution that manages all of that digital information about the life cycle of that canister. So the other thing that we quickly learned is that once we had this data lake of information around each individual digital asset, we were able to quickly start to combine that with information out of their ERP system in order to build a complete history and start to predict the availability of these canisters within their production and maintenance schedules. So traditionally, when you're using returnable transport items, many times what we see is that they're really not a constrained resource within the production planning, although they are very important in production planning because you need something to put product in. So what we were able to do through the analytics and dashboarding capability was to look forward of their production schedule, take a look at all of their canisters and cylinders that were to be used for that production schedule, and quickly predict when they were going to run into an issue of either not having enough or not having those canisters or cylinders in the right place. And by combining that information, we were able to provide them with a real-time dashboard that would allow them to not only look and see when they were going to run into trouble, but also request from either another location or potentially even a customer location that those canisters or cylinders be returned. We took the same approach with maintenance and inspection. And what we were quickly able to do was not only understand if they had a fleet of returnable transport items that were going to be out of maintenance or out of compliance from an inspection perspective, but because we were able to manage the historical data of transit time and how long it took them to maintain canisters and cylinders or inspect canisters and cylinders, we were able to apply that knowledge and accurately predict through machine learning how long they needed to back up the inspection or maintenance date to really make sure that they were compliant. So one of the challenges that was solved is they would look at a maintenance or inspection date 30 days out, and it would look okay. But the reality is that to transport the item, to run it through their maintenance contractor, to get the item back, that alone took 45 days. So by combining all of that information along with the fleet of what the reality is from the maintenance and inspection dates on the fleet of assets, you get a much better picture as to what's going on. So that whole predictive capability of being able to combine information across multiple systems is key in this transformation. So what are some takeaways from the examples? First, quick wins are important. I can't stress that enough. Making the migration to the digital supply chain, if you look at it all in one, it's going to be a daunting task. So really take a look at, what you can do today to get a measurable ROI and make the scope manageable. And what you will find is that the actual ROI that you get out of this typically is larger than what you expect if you do it in an iterative way where you can get quick wins. The other area, which we quickly learned as we went through this process, is you need to understand your partner ecosystem. So the ability of how much value you're going to get out of the extension to the digital supply chain also includes when and where your partners will be able to participate. So if your partners can't participate in your transformation to the digital supply chain, your value is going to be limited to within your own four walls. So it's super important to understand your partner ecosystem. The third area from a key takeaway here is understanding data. And what do I mean by that? So it's always easier to macro up information rather than go back and get information that you never had. So take a look at the most granular pieces of information that you can get, capture that, and then be able to utilize that information, because if you don't have the right level of data, you're not going to get the value that you're looking for out of the digital supply chain. And then ultimately, we need to consider the viability of new technology. I'll give an example, in blockchain, right? So there's a lot of hype around blockchain and the use of blockchain. And, there is viable use cases for blockchain and other new technologies, but it really becomes important to be able to pilot a number of new technologies first and look at what options are available and make sure that you're choosing the right option from a technology perspective in order to get the most value out of your solution. So I will end with some contact information. So if you want to contact us or if you want to contact Honeywell, my contact information is here. Couple of different ways to get in touch with us. You can do that through email. You can do that through Twitter. And I look forward to a couple of questions which have come in during the webcast. And Maureen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand that back to you. And maybe you can walk us through some of the questions that have come in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, John. As you mentioned, we're now moving on to the question and answer portion of the webcast. If you do have questions, you can submit them now using the purple Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We do have a few in there, so I'll get right to it. The first question, in the building block slide, you talked about context data. Can you give us additional examples of what you mean by context data? Sure,
that's actually a great question. So I'm gonna use one of our examples, that we did in the pharmaceutical space, just as an example. So, right now within pharmaceuticals, there's a big push for the DSCSA regulation, which is requiring every pharmaceutical to be serialized down to the saleable unit level. So as companies look to do that, you can get by with just putting in the serial number, the expiration date, the batch, and the GTIN of the product. And that's all that's required, basically, to support the SCSA requirement. But the way that we look at it is, why not take that as an advantage to say, well, additional pieces of context data that might be interesting for that product might be what line it was packaged on, what shift it was packaged on, when it was packaged, its intended recipient if it's a make-to-order scenario, if it's cold chain, what was the temperature that it was packaged at, how long has it been in or out of temperature. So being able to add additional components and additional pieces of context to your data is very important, because the ability to then report on that later is key. And the other thing that I would say to that question is, you want to make sure that you're not locked in to just particular pieces of context data. That has to be flexible. You need to be able to add to it later in order to take advantage of use cases that you hadn't thought about at the start of your project.
Thank you. The next question, you spoke about machine learning, but did not reference artificial intelligence. Why?
Great question. So we look at it in kind of a progression, right? So in the machine learning space, that is, we are in that phase of data and understanding now, where you can look, machines can look, or analytics dashboards can look at repetitive patterns that are happening within the supply chain and start to make decisions or suggestions based upon those repetitive patterns. I think we're still a little early to say that we have artificial intelligence that's going to make decisions based on not only patterns, but things that might happen. So, machine learning for us is something that is here today, and we're starting to leverage it. And I think, AI and artificial intelligence is certainly something that will come in the future, but I don't know that we're quite there yet.
Thank you. The next question, you mentioned blockchain during your presentation, but it was not mentioned in any of the case studies. Where do you feel blockchain fits?
That's another great question. So there's actually a couple of very interesting blockchain pilots that are going on right now. So I would say that, if you're looking at blockchain, and everyone should be looking at blockchain. Let me start with that. So if you are looking at a transformation to the digital supply chain, you should be at least running a blockchain pilot or starting to think about how I can utilize blockchain within my supply chain. If you look at what's going on with the Maersk line from shipping, they have an interesting blockchain pilot going on that will manage where the location of ships are and the contents, the cargo contents of those ships. De Beers also had a very interesting pilot with blockchain. And I think that the interesting thing about both of those pilots is the number of participants in the general scope of things was somewhat limited, and they are used to dealing with a very precise and very regimented way of doing things, right? The De Beers one was very interesting in tracking large diamonds across their supply chain, and what they decided to do was only track a certain number to a certain number of partners. So what they're learning and what others are learning through the blockchain process is that blockchain is not necessarily the panacea, that certain commercials would make it, but you can leverage it for areas where you need immutable information that nobody can change in the future. And the way that I like to look at it is, you may look at blockchain for a part of your supply chain data, but not necessarily all of your supply chain data. So we could do a whole hour on blockchain and the use of blockchain, but it is a very interesting technology. And as I said, everyone should be looking to build out at least a pilot of how they may leverage blockchain across their digital supply chain, but not necessarily is it quite ready for full production environments yet.
Thank you. The next question, we are planning on migrating to S4 in the next few years. How would this migration impact our digital transformation plans?
Another great question. I don't think it should impact your digital transformation plans. I think that we have a number of customers that we have brought to S4. We have a number of customers that are kind of looking at going to S4 in the next couple of years. And the key to that is really putting in the edge execution solution that you can start to get value across across the digital transformation today, but making sure that the integration points are transferable from your ECC environment to your S4 environment, because we don't want to wait. We don't want to stop and say, okay, I'm going to wait for my S4 process to happen, and then I'll continue my transformation to the digital supply chain. We just want to understand, that the pieces that we put in place now to optimize processes across the digital supply chain can be transferred to my S4 instance once I take that journey.
Well, thank you, John. That looks like all the questions in our Q&A right now, so I will hand it back to you for any final remarks before we close the webcast today.
Yes, and first I would like to thank everyone for joining today. I think we might have had a little bit of a technical glitch in the very beginning with the slides advancing backwards and forwards, and for that I apologize. Again, feel free to reach out to us here at Axis for more information on any of the solutions that you've seen, or for conversations around the transformation to the digital supply chain. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for coming, and I'll give you all 19 minutes back in your day.
Thank you so much, John, for a great webcast. On behalf of ASUG, I'd like to thank Access, as well as everyone who took the time today to attend this webcast. As John mentioned, if you do have additional questions, you can contact him directly by clicking on the speaker engagement tool on your screen. Before we go, though, I'd like to leave you some quick information on ASUG for anyone unfamiliar with our user group. ASUG helps connect SAP customers to the people and information that they need to maximize their investment in SAP. If you'd like to speak to someone about becoming a member of ASUG, please message info@asug.com. As mentioned before, the recording and slides from today's program will be posted to the ASUG website, and all registrants will receive a follow-up email. Please take a moment to complete the survey on the right of your console, or by clicking on the green survey engagement tool at the bottom of your screen. With that, I'd like to close today's webcast. Have a great day, everyone.